But I do think a time has come for us to reflect as a nation and ask ourselves, what do we want as Kenyans? And this is not just for me and you.
No.
It's for every citizen, every right-thinking citizen, to pause and reflect and ask, what is happening? Where is the shoe hurting? What can be done about it? I think for me, we've sunk to our lowest. We've never, as a country, been as mismanaged, as misgoverned, misruled as it is today. We have a regime that is self-centered, that doesn't care about the people. The burden of taxation, which is so heavy, yet the budget outlook statement is clear that the budget is going to triple. The burden is going to triple, if not go beyond that. And the deterioration of services and quality of leadership, as you put it, it makes me look back at where we have been. We've been in Parliament together for more than a decade. And look at even our worst and our best times. Our worst time being the end days of the KANU era, our best days being the Kibaki days, especially the initial days. And I can say without equivocation that where we are is worse than the darkest days of KANU.
We are not lacking serious leadership in Kenya. What is the problem?
I think the problem goes back to us individually and collectively as the voters in Kenya. I think we became so comfortable during the Kibaki era, and the dividends of the Kibaki era spilled over to the Uhuru era. The economy was still growing, and things were not as bad. And as voters, we have taken leadership for granted. You think anything goes. Because why would you elect leaders that have no history of performing, and the history they have is history? You would not even agree to take in somebody as a farmhand. Because I always used to ask that question during the campaigns. If you are looking for a milkman to milk your cows, and you hear that a fellow coming to seek employment at your boma, when he was milking at your neighbor's, was caught, not with a whole bucket, just a small bottle, that while milking for your neighbor, he reserved a small bottle which he put in his jacket for his child. Your neighbor got the rest of the milk and it was taken to the dairy. But he was caught with that one bottle and was sacked. You would not agree to hire that person.
For sure.
You would actually chase them from your home angrily, asking them, do you think I'm a fool? I don't know what you did to my neighbor?
Yes.
He stole only a bottle, and the rest of the milk gallons went to the farmer. But for management of country's affair, you are taking the thief, not who steals the bottle, who steals the bucket, the milk in the bucket, steals also the bucket, leaves you the bottle, and after a while, even takes the one in the bottle and tells you the cow kicked the milk. You see,
yes.
We do not, the public, the bulk of the public in Kenya, do not connect with the fact that public resources are their resources, such that I should be very upset as a taxpayer that my resources are being wasted, are being abused, are being stolen. Just the way I would get so mad if just my pen is taken away or my handbag, or anything from your farm, or just something little by somebody working in your house. You would tell them you are untrustworthy, get out of my house. because they didn't ask you. It's something you could have given them. But the fact that they misappropriated the item, you chase them out. So we need to ask ourselves, if you are crying today about services in the hospitals, you are crying about you being unable to pay the fees, which, by the way, are going to be raised by the taxes. If you are complaining of our taxation, of general abuse of resources and mismanagement of the country, why then do you hire the worst? Why don't you hire the other candidates? Because you have many. And I'm not talking of just one job at the top. I am talking from that MCA to all the seats in the county, to the presidency. Why are we hiring the worst? If we really think the shoe is pinching, the only way to rectify it is using our collective power at the ballot. But I would describe it as the power of one, because you vote alone. So each person or a majority of Kenyans determining that we will leave our national values and vote people of integrity, and that we hold them to account. For me, that's the solution. But this is a debate. This is a question every Kenyan must answer. Answer yourself. And when you sit with others, let's discuss this.
Is it the way we have structured our politics that our people really don't get to think about who we are voting for? I remember at one time when Matiba was a candidate, it did not matter who stood on for Dasili. He was just voted in mass. And also, if you look at what has been happening, there's a time we had this thing of 411. 41 tribes against one. And then we also had this campaign against the rich and dynasties. Is
That's
it that
2022.
2022, the other day? Is it that Kenya, you have to market some hatred for you to be voted for?
The two campaigns that have marketed hate are 207 and 2022. And 2022 is the introduction by the KK group of the class, which has now turned out to be fake. They talked of dynasties, they are creating dynasties. They talked of hustlers, they are flattening the hustlers. In Mount Kenya, the youth were called hustlers. Today they are being called Mongiki. Even old women are being called Mongiki. It looks like there is a hate being brewed against a community again. 207, it was 41 against 1. 202, when we removed the KANU regime, it was not about tribe.
No.
It was not about Moi's ethnic group.
No.
It is the entire nation, a majority, who said we are tired of the misrule by KANU. I actually almost weep when I remember the opportunity we had to turn around Kenya completely. Had there not been misunderstanding allowed to foment immediately, we came to power in 2003. You know, the disagreements on appointments, which then spilled over to the constitutional review, which then, after the failed referendum, fueled to a hate campaign.
Yes.
How can we reboot as a country? We have to think of two things. A campaign of integrity would not be a hate campaign against any community.
No.
No community comes to power. Even today, it's not a community in power.
No, it's an individual.
It's an individual and its cronies. Kibaki era, it was not a community in power.
No.
It was Kibaki and the cabinet he chose, which served every Kenyan. Even when there was a coalition government and issues of corruption started coming back, it was still not about a community, it was the country. And you can see even the corruption was shared by the entire coalition government. So the two campaigns that have been ethnicized and the worst regime that has ruled with an ethnic lens is the KK regime, where you can appoint over 50 heads of parastatals from one ethnic community, where you can openly say that a government will belong to shareholders from 2 ethnic communities. You know, it's still a shareholders government, by the way. But it doesn't mean those ethnic communities are the net beneficiaries.
No,
it is cronies from those 2 communities. The ordinary rural person or even urban person, urban Kalenjin is suffering like any other Kenyan. The taxation burden is on them. If they are not entrepreneurs who wouldn't care about how much is being taxed because they are getting undeserved monies, they are suffering just like anybody. The average Kikuyu, in spite of the declaration by a certain Gachagua that is a shareholders government, Kikuyu have not felt any of that. The ordinary person has not felt any of that.
Yes.
So we need this ethnic conversation. Is it your man in power or woman, or is it the policies? The policies of the Kibaki government, inviting every child to school. It was every child in Kenya, not every child from a community. The growth of the economy, the magical growth of the economy affected every corner of Kenya. We saw a vibrant economy, both rural and urban places. The general well-being of every Kenyan, access to hospital, to education, infrastructure began to thrive before our very eyes. So when shall we get it as Kenyans? It's not ethnicity. It is the individual seeking office from MCA to presidency and what they stand for, and whether they have a history of performers. I was saying during the last campaign, and I was looking at my principal, who was roads minister during that Kibaki era and later prime minister, and saying that the roads we are enjoying today, the designs were done that time. The opening up of the roads, the repair of infrastructure. So without equivocation, I can say he's a performer. Nobody is perfect, but we know he's a performer. I served in the Ministry of Water. I delivered. I served in Justice. I delivered. So can everybody put their credentials forward? Those who knew that their history is as dark as darkness itself were saying, usitulete historia. Don't give us history, because you have no record to show.
Kibaki's regime performed very well, and Kenyans were very optimistic the first term. The second term, it started going down. What are these critical elements in the first 5 years that made Kibaki's regime? Actually, Kenyans were most optimistic people across the world. They were very, very optimistic. When Kibaki started, and on a few, with a few individuals I've discussed with, I've been one of the biggest supporter of the Kibaki regime, particularly the first 5 years, where at one time, as a member of parliament, an accident occurred, and we lost 5 students from Masinde Muliro. And I made a lot of noise. I said, you know, you are doing a 12-lane road to Thika. Did you discover oil in Thika when you cannot fill potholes? I was the only opposition member. And Kibaki took the trouble, and he looked for me. And when I went to him and explained, I told him this is what happened. In fact, I was scared when I was looked for. So I asked Soita Shitanda, the late, to come along with me. And when I went and I discussed the problem, and I told him we can't lose, in an African setting, your biggest investment is your children, because you look upon them to be the ones to hold your hand tomorrow. And he told me what is the problem. I explained. And there was a road to be done in Nyandarua. He ordered Mudaura on the spot. He said, that road will not be done. That money should do the road from Kisumu to Kitale. He didn't look at me as a member of his party or somebody. That's his first term. And I found, then I just fell in love with this old man. He was looking at Kenyans as Kenyans. And even the second term, if tribal inclinations started coming in, it was not out of hand, the way we have seen in several regimes. It was still within manageable levels.
When you were talking about Kibaki and how he listened to you as an opposition member, yes, Kibaki was looking at the country,
Yes.
not an ethnic
No.
group. But also, Kibaki had a memory. And I am
A very
sure
serious one.
he remembered you as a KANU minister. Because how you have projected yourself is as a Kenyan. Visiting leaders from all corners. And this is the same way Kirwa was, because during that time of tension between opposition and KANU, after the 92 elections, Kirwa was one of the few, and yourself, who could talk with the opposition. And I remember Kirwa coming to do a harambe for me, and it putting him in a lot of trouble.
Yes.
And I remember that every time they would see us talking, you two would be cautioned.
Yeah,
So I'm sure Kibaki, one, he took it as his responsibility that if people are dying because of bad roads, it was his responsibility, his government's responsibility to redo the road. But I am sure that in the back of his mind, he also remembered you as a member who works for the country.
Thank you.
So that must have contributed to him looking for you, because he took you seriously. I better listen to this young man. Must have been what was working in his mind. Yeah.
Now, the elephant in the room, cost of living, is just spiraled to a level where Kenyans don't really know what to do. You are a mother, you are a grandmother. There is nothing that pains when a family cannot afford to put a decent meal on the table, just because everything is becoming impossible. And the little they earn has all been taken away in form of taxation. What can we do? Because really, we can't wait for 4 years. What can we do today to try and mitigate the current situation the country is facing?
You know, the KK regime is tone deaf. Even if Kenyans complain, you remember that the financial year that is coming to an end, Kenyans overwhelmingly rejected the finance bill. It was passed by force, by fire. Now there is a budget outlook statement promising a budget that is going to push Kenyans even harder. I think Kenyans have to be able to use their residual power, because sovereignty belongs to the people.
Yes.
And it begins with each one of us, leaders and citizens alike, using their agency, their voices to say enough is enough. Already people are having hardships. They cannot feed their children.
They can't.
There's nothing as painful as the cry of a hungry child when you have nothing to give them. There's nothing as painful for a Kenyan sleeping hungry without knowing what you will eat even tomorrow, without knowing where your rent is coming from. Many people's houses are being closed.
Yes.
Children are out of school, and you are being promised a worse time. At a time, State House is asking for a bigger budget than the whole country. 351 billion versus 341 for the counties. 47 counties is the whole of Kenya. And the 341 is for everything. 351 for State House is just for splashing. You see? If you have people in authority who do not appear to apply common sense, even in the simple task of budgeting, then Kenyans need to use their residual power. You have said you do not believe in the streets. I do. Without demonstrations, multi-party politics would never have returned.
Yes.
Without demonstrations, we would not have started the constitutional review.
True.
Without demonstrations, we would not be having the new constitution.
A fact.
Without demonstration, even the fake NADCO talks,
Yes.
because those talks did not bring
No.
anything for Kenyans.
Yes.
they would not have been on the table. So Kenyans have to be able to push. And there's nothing wrong with being in the streets. There's something wrong with the police killing you for using your agency. Even if demonstrators became rioters, no human being can withstand tear gas.
That's true.
You will not see a majority choke on it. You do not have to kill anybody. Tear gas would be enough.
Yeah, that's true.
But we know, I've been in those demonstrations, and people are not rioters. Actually, they are like joyful carnivores until police come to throw tear gas and to beat up people. And that's when things go wrong and everything goes south. So I would say, respect people's rights. This is to the regime. Respect people's rights. Let people come out and demonstrate. We are being told in this country that in Eldoret it's okay to demonstrate. In pockets of the country you can demonstrate, but not in Nairobi. We don't want guided demonstrations. We want to demonstrate anywhere, anyhow, and within the law. Do not tear gas people who are just using their voices. And Kenyans, we will have to spread this. Just ask yourself, what if we all came out peacefully in the country?
Of course,
the fact that Nairobi is coming out when nobody else is coming out, they bring all the police to Nairobi. One day, even the police themselves will demonstrate because there's nothing on their pay slip. Civil servants, the police service, nothing is being left on the pay slip. What will their children eat? What will the children of civil servants eat?
How will they go
what
to school?
Will the children of thousands who are unemployed? And what will the thousands of unemployed youth eat? We are not using money to create jobs. We are using money for splashing, globe-trotting, and enriching a few people, employing so many people in government that is not needed. So one day, I know, people will recover their agency and they'll tell this regime enough is enough. And I would encourage Kenyans to use their agency.
You have always been referred to as the Iron Lady because you come out forcefully and you believe in the rule of law, that nobody should bend the rule of law. What do we do with our younger generation so that they can come up strongly?
Yeah.
You are talking about taking action when necessary, disciplined action, not looting, not breaking people's things. What really do we need to, because it looks like the youth are not taking their civil obligation seriously. There is a section that takes their civil obligation very seriously, but there is another section that we really need to work on for them to understand this is their country. When it pains, they pain more. They are the parents of tomorrow. They need to come out strongly and defend what belongs to them.
Actually, I would talk about discipline. Because discipline, when you follow the law, it's about discipline. And that's why there are consequences when you don't. We can't be telling our children to be disciplined when we are completely indisciplined. I will again want to address the Kenyan voters, including myself. You get the government you deserve. Because if you put crooks in power, you'll get a crooked government.
Well,
if you put looters in power, you get a looting government. So the kind of government we have, we deserve it for now because that's who you put in power. I may disagree and say a majority of Kenyans did not put this regime in power. But even to be able to rig, people must have had, we in Azimio say, the KK regime got about 5.9 million votes against our 8. The fact that almost 6 million voted for them enabled them to manipulate the elections. If the difference was like day and night, the way it was in 2002 when Kibaki came in, millions of his votes versus Uhuru's 1 million, it becomes impossible. When he has such a lead in members of parliament, it becomes impossible to rig. So we bear responsibility that so many right-thinking Kenyans could vote in a regime that comes then and does everything wrong. And you vote a regime that by its character, by its history, is headed by people who are totally indisciplined, then you can't expect discipline. You see? So we, as voters, must again question ourselves, what sort of people do we want to guide us?
And also at the end of the day, 8 million people did not vote.
Yeah. It means we also, for some reason, did not inspire the 8 million. We need to have this conversation. Are you helping yourself when you abstain from voting? You also assisted in the rigging. Because if you have voted one way or the other, there would have been a clear difference between the teams. Next elections, dear voter, this is your life, my life. If you're unemployed, it's about your employment. If you have a sick person who has either died or is on the verge of death and you have no money for medicines, you're trying Harambes, it's not working, think about that person and about you and your other relatives in future. Vote for health. Vote for people who can give you health. Don't just look at the manifesto. Look at the history of delivery. We said we would give free education. We done it in the Kibaki regime. We knew it was possible. We talked of free health. We knew it was possible. Look at the history. Are these people who know what they are talking about? Not people who will promise you heaven. And when you give them the power, they start telling you now, I want you to give me everything you have. Even before you put food on your plate, I want your money so that I can be able to do the things I want to do as a leader. Not for you, the things I want as a leader. Who has asked for houses?
Nobody.
Why should people be taxed against their will to build houses? Even in old days, during the KANU era, the Kenyatta one and the Moi era in the beginning, I was remembering this morning that there was a civil servant housing scheme.
Yes.
People are not deducted money,
No.
but funds were put together. A National Housing Corporation built houses, and I remembered the ones in Kirilisho because they were really nice. I coveted them, but I had just started working, so I wasn't eligible. And that scheme went on, and then corruption overpowered it as the years went by, and it stopped working. It was again revived during the Kibaki era and houses built in Kakamega, if you can remember. Nice houses. So it is possible to do housing. The council was also doing houses. Nairobi City Council, as it was then called. Now it's a county. The Madaraka houses, the warehouses, where people are buying. Even Umoja was one such scheme. Buruburu.
Karobang South.
It is possible, Gay, all those estates. It's possible to provide housing without killing people with taxes. It is possible to develop without overtaxing. The rules of the game are simple. Stop waste of public funds. Stop non-essential spending. That's where the money is. Instead of increasing taxes, do it differently. So I'm telling Kenyans, elect people who can do it with a history of delivering, people whose credentials commend themselves to you. We have a job to do as voters. Otherwise, we will perish. We are almost perishing. And use your agency. We must stop this regime from killing us. 5 years, many will have died without medical services, out of hunger, and our children will be totally out of school. We can't all fit going abroad for jobs. Create jobs in Kenya. The jobs created during the Kibaki era were not all created by the government. It's by freeing the economy and Kenyans, private sector, from the SMEs to the big companies, created the jobs. Now jobs are being actually taken away by this regime because companies are closing. Manufacturers are moving away from Kenya.
Because of high taxation.
So you chase and remove jobs that are existing, and you want to take us abroad to do menial jobs? Because I
Other
don't.
than that,
And who is going abroad without a passport?
yeah, and secondly, Martha, the most important asset
Yeah.
of a country is its people.
Human resource.
Human resource is the framework on which everything grows.
Yeah.
And you are exporting your best. So how are you going to develop? Other than that, you just talked about this housing. You are a legal mind, one of the most senior lawyers this country has. The land is public. The money is public.
Yeah.
Who should these houses belong to?
The Kenyan people.
Now, why are they being sold? Who
They're
is
not-
benefiting out of that sale?
And the sale price is higher than the Chinese houses in town.
Yes.
And you call them affordable housing?
And who is benefiting?
And the land is now being given to private developers. So you grab county land, because land belongs to the county. Public land in each county belongs to the county.
Yes.
The national government is grabbing county land, giving to select entrepreneurs who then build the houses and benefit from them. If it was to the county, and they're not a profit-making entity, they are just trying to be sustainable, to build more,
Then they'll be
the
affordable.
prices would be down.
And then there'll be affordable housing.
If the tendering was open and we knew that companies are competing with favorable prices, we would know. It is the same thing being planned for the new, I don't know its name, the successor of NHIF.
Yes.
I am told that we should expect 9 companies, they are zoning Kenya into 9 zones, 9 companies that will manage that money and determine whose health is catered for. So you tell us about cartels and you come and bring us cartels in housing and cartels in health, cartels everywhere. I heard Kindiki talking of cartels in passport, that he will chase away the cartels. So you've been creating cartels and nurturing cartels, a government of cartels for cartels, not government of the people by the people.
Where is the law? You've been a proponent of rule of the law.
Yeah.
And I think you had a lot of influence on Kibaki's respect for the law. Because when he came in on the world constitution. But still, he performed. Still, there was respect for the law. Still, everybody had a voice. Where is the rule of law today?
The rule of law has gone to the dogs when courts are intimidated to the extent that they bow down to the wishes of the executive. Because that symbolic move of a Chief Justice who is being bullied, the whole judiciary is being bullied, and the Chief Justice capitulates and goes to dine with the executive. And it's not a public meeting. And they come back mellowed and they are told, we'll give you money. The money you are getting is not private, it's public money. And you don't need to go to State House to get it. It's a very bad signal. I want to single out the High Court and say we do get very good judgments from the High Court.
Yes.
Not to say that there are no judges who need watching in the High Court, but the High Court is generally good. The Court of Appeal is second to the High Court. I will say nothing of the Supreme Court. They gave us a word about hot air. And I leave people to see whether it's a court that gives good rulings or the rulings, to use their language, are full of hot air. And the magistrates, the lower courts, I don't have much interaction, but I must say there are sections in the judiciary who've been very firm. But again, voter, if a person has not in the past obeyed the rule of law, why would you expect that when you elect them, they'll obey the rule of law? If they've been a violator of the law, if they have shown disrespect to the public by not respecting their property, why would you expect? The kind of impunity we are getting, we built up that impunity by electing people known not by their adherence to the rule of law, but to the impunity. So whether it's corruption, whether it's misrule, whether it's lack of respect for the rule of law, can we have this conversation as Kenyans and accept that the rain started beating us where we threw caution to the wind and gave votes, supported people known to do everything that works against our interests.
Do you see a possibility of us sinking into total anarchy? Because if the executive doesn't respect the rule of law,
Yeah.
where are we really headed?
We must not allow our nation to sink to anarchy. The Constitution gives us, as the people, sovereign power. We can collectively put a stop to what is happening. But you must raise your voice. Don't expect me to raise my voice and it will be enough. Raise your voice, I raise mine. Collectively, we raise our voices as Kenyans. That is what is needed. Other nations have gotten out of the mess. We can also get out of the mess. Even the French had to have the French Revolution. A revolution need not always be bloody. If a majority of the people raise their voices, even during the Moi era, it is through collectively raising our voices to the extent where the regime had to act. Your agency is called for. You must raise your voice if the shoe is hurting. Yeah.
Where is our identity? One of the things I admire about yourself, Lumumba talks about it quite greatly, is identifying yourself as an African, even your dressing. You've been also going around Africa a number of times, participating in ensuring there's democracy, monitoring, and all those issues. The way, and you talked about it, you said being an African, we cared about each other. We were honest, we were transparent, we did all that is good. Why is Africa losing its identity? And Kenya seems to be leading in that. We are aping the West quite a great deal. You looked at people like Mobutu Sese Seko, with the trillions, he will go and have his wine in France while his people are suffering at home. This African identity, whereby we dress the way you dress, we act the way you act, we live culturally, we had powerful values. What is really needed for an African to know that I'm an African?
I think there is a move for people to embrace culture. And I have seen even in the younger generation, as we grew up, we started admiring straightened hair. And African hair is not straight. So for the longest, I wore a palm. Then I realized my African attire is not matching with my head. And I decided to have my hair locked. Because an African's hair loves locks.
True.
And it has thrived, so that from far you identify me by my whole being as an African.
Great.
And I am seeing a lot of young people, even our dressing is changing. Weddings this day, you see people wearing African outfits. Or outfits with a part African attire. Things are changing, the trend is changing, and we have to encourage one another. But when it comes to leadership, let's look at the continent. We must also encourage each other. What is happening